Hello, my name is Chase Steele. I'm 31 years old, and if you ask anyone in Miami, Florida, they might tell you I'm a culinary millionaire, a star who rose from a food truck and conquered the world with bold Mexican flavors. But if you ask me, I'll just laugh, shake my head, and say I'm an ordinary guy once deemed a failure by my family. Always pushed to the sidelines, never truly seen. My story doesn't begin with flashing lights or glowing headlines. It starts in a much humbler place, a small kitchen in Robstown, Texas, where the scent of dried chilies, cilantro, and my grandmother's love ignited a fire in my heart. I grew up in Corpus Christi, Texas, in a family people would call intellectual. My father, Anthony Steele, was a renowned internist, the kind of man whose presence commanded a room to fall silent and listen. Tall, with a deep, steady voice, he carried the authority of someone who knew he was in control. My mother, Carol Steele, was a university lecturer in English literature, with sharp eyes and a way of speaking that made you feel like your every word was being dissected. To everyone else, they were a perfect pair, building an exemplary family with 3 children: me, my younger sister Paige, and my younger brother Eric. Paige, 3 years my junior, was the golden child, smart, beautiful, always earning straight A's and dreaming of becoming a lawyer. Eric, 5 years younger, inherited our father's calm demeanor, with a passion for medicine that had him dissecting toys to diagnose them as a toddler. And me? I was the odd one out, the thorn in my parents' side, the one always compared and found not good enough. From a young age, I knew I was different. While Paige and Eric studied diligently, I'd sneak into the kitchen, stealing my mom's flour to try making tortillas. I don't recall the exact moment I fell in love with cooking, but I vividly remember the summers at my grandmother Teresa's house in Robstown. Her home was a magical place, a world apart from the cold, pressure-filled house in Corpus Christi. Her kitchen was always filled with aromas: roasted guajillo chiles, freshly chopped cilantro, corn tortillas sizzling on a cast-iron skillet. My grandmother, with her silver hair tied back neatly and a warm smile, always called me her little chef. She was Mexican, raised in a small town near the border, and her stories of her childhood of crowded family meals captivated me. Every summer, when my parents were busy with work, they'd send me and my siblings to stay with her. Those were the freest months of my life. I still remember standing on an old wooden stool stirring a pot of mole poblano under her guidance, my small hands covered in chocolate and chili sauce. She taught me how to choose dried chilies, how to smell them to know when they were perfectly toasted, how to balance spice, sweetness, and tang in a dish. "Chase, you have to cook with your heart," she'd say, placing her hand on her chest, her eyes sparkling. "A good dish doesn't just feed the stomach, it feeds the soul." But back home in Corpus Christi, no one understood my passion. My parents had grand plans for us. My father wanted me to become a doctor like him, or at least a lawyer like Paige was being groomed to be. My mother dreamed of me standing at a university podium like her. Every time I mentioned cooking, my father would scoff and my mother would sigh, as if I'd said something foolish. "Cooking is for hired chefs, Chase," my father once said, his voice dripping with disappointment. "You need a real career, something that commands respect." Those words, though I was only 12 or 13, etched themselves into my mind like a scar that never healed. Paige and Eric, the obedient children, always followed our parents' wishes. Paige was so brilliant she was invited to speak at her middle school graduation, and Eric won a science fair with a clay model of a human heart. Me? I had no notable achievements, at least not in my parents' eyes. My grades were average, and I was often caught daydreaming in class, thinking about adding cinnamon to enchilada sauce or making tamales softer. "Chase, why can't you be like Paige or Eric?" my mother once asked, her voice weary. I didn't answer, but inside I ached. I didn't want to be like them. I wanted to be myself, but being myself never seemed good enough. Those summers with my grandmother were my salvation. There I wasn't compared or judged. She let me experiment freely, fail freely. Once I ruined an entire pot of pozole by adding too much salt, and instead of scolding me, she just laughed and said failure was the best way to learn. Every mistake brings you closer to the perfect dish, she said, pulling me into a warm hug. Her hugs, scented with faint perfume and spices, stayed with me, even when things later took a darker turn. But even those summers came at a cost. Returning home meant facing my parents' cold silence. They never asked what I did at Grandma's, never cared about the dishes I eagerly described. Once I brought home a plate of tacos I'd made, hoping they'd try them and praise me. My father glanced at them and said, "Looks like something from a cheap diner," before turning away. My mother said, "Chase, you should focus on your studies instead of these games." Paige and Eric, though they said nothing, never tried my food either. They were too busy with their prestigious dreams, and to them, I was just their weird older brother with no future. The gap between me and my family grew wider. By 16, my parents started talking about college, insisting I choose a medical or law school. They brought home guidebooks, career aptitude tests, and planned my future as if I had no say. I tried to explain that I didn't want to be a doctor or lawyer, that I wanted to open a restaurant and share my grandmother's food with the world. But every time I spoke up, they cut me off. "Don't be foolish, Chase," my father said, his voice commanding. "Cooking isn't a career. You need something stable, something that makes the family proud." Family pride. Those words were like a blade, cutting into me every time I heard them. I wondered if they'd ever be proud of me, of the dishes I made, of the smiles I saw on my grandmother's face when I got a recipe right, or was it all just a childish dream of a clueless kid? My childhood passed like that, caught between two worlds. One filled with love and freedom in my grandmother's kitchen, and another filled with pressure and judgment at home. I learned to keep my passion to myself, sharing it only with my grandmother, the one person who understood me. But deep down, I knew one day I'd have to face the truth. To pursue my dream, I'd have to sacrifice everything: my family, my security, and the place I once called home. At 18, everything changed. That was the moment I made the biggest decision of my life, a choice that led to my family disowning me and thrust me into a journey both painful and radiant. Though labeled a failure, though cast aside, I never stopped believing in the fire my grandmother kindled in my heart. That fire guided me through the darkest days, leading me to a light my family never believed I could reach. That summer, I had just graduated high school. While my friends were busy applying to prestigious universities, I sat in my room staring at the stack of college admissions materials my parents had left on my desk. Thick guidebooks, brochures about medical and law schools, and promises of a stable future suffocated me. My parents had a plan. I would study medicine or law, graduate with a prestigious degree, and become part of the Steele family legacy. But every time I looked at those papers, I saw my grandmother's kitchen, heard her laughter, and smelled roasted chilies and grilled corn tortillas. I knew I didn't belong in a clinic or a courtroom. I belonged in a kitchen, creating dishes that made people smile, the way my grandmother had done for me. The decision to reject college wasn't a spur-of-the-moment choice. It grew over years, through my father's disappointed headshakes, my mother's sighs, and the cold glances from Paige and Eric. I was tired of trying to be someone I wasn't. I wanted to live true to myself, to turn my passion for cooking into a career, even if it meant defying every expectation my family had. The idea of a food truck began to take shape in my mind. I pictured myself driving an old, beat-up truck painted bright red like dried chilies, traveling around selling tacos and enchiladas infused with my grandmother's essence, but reimagined in my own way. It wasn't just a job. It was a dream, a way to keep my grandmother alive in every dish. But telling my parents about that dream was another challenge altogether. I knew they wouldn't understand. I delayed it for months, letting fear and hope battle within me. Finally, one August evening during family dinner, I summoned all my courage. My father sat at the head of the table talking about an upcoming medical conference. My mother sliced her steak slowly, as if analyzing every fiber. Paige and Eric sat across from me, eating quietly, but I knew they were listening. I took a deep breath, put down my fork, and said, "I don't want to go to college. I want to start a food truck selling Mexican food. I want to be a chef." The room fell silent. My mother's fork froze mid-air. My father looked up, his eyes sharp as knives. Paige raised an eyebrow and Eric stared at me like I'd just announced I was flying to Mars. "What did you say, Chase?" my father asked, his voice so low it sent a shiver down my spine. I repeated myself, trying to keep my voice steady. "I want to start a food truck. I want to cook, make Mexican food. It's what I love." My mother laughed, but it wasn't a joyful laugh. It was dry, dripping with sarcasm. "You're joking, right? You want to give up college to sell food on the street, like a peddler?" My face flushed, but I didn't back down. "It's not peddling. It's my passion. I want to do what I love like Grandma." Bringing up my grandmother was a mistake. My father slammed his hand on the table, making the plates rattle. "Don't drag my mother into this, Chase," he roared. "She may have enjoyed cooking, but she never threw away her future to chase something frivolous." "What do you think you're doing? Ruining your life?" I tried to explain, talking about my grandmother's dishes, how they made me feel alive, and my dream of sharing them with others. But my father didn't listen. Neither did my mother. They looked at me like I was a foolish child who didn't know what he was saying. "You won't get anywhere with that food truck," my mother said, her voice ice cold. "You'll fail, and then you'll regret not listening to us." Paige, who rarely spoke during arguments, chimed in. "Chase, are you sure? I mean, you're good at cooking, but it's not a real career." Eric nodded, though he said nothing. I looked at them, my younger siblings with whom I'd once played and shared summers, now siding with our parents, seeing me as an outsider. The argument dragged on for hours but went nowhere. My parents declared that if I refused college, they would cut off all financial support. "You want to swim on your own? Fine," my father said, his voice thick with anger. "But don't expect us to be there when you drown." My mother was softer, but her words cut deeper. "Chase, we only want what's best for you. But if you choose this path, you're on your own." I left the dinner table with a heavy heart. That night I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was making a mistake. But then I thought of my grandmother, her smile, and the way she believed in me. I couldn't give up. I didn't want to live a life that wasn't mine. A few days later, I packed my bags, taking only a few clothes, some savings from part-time jobs, and a burning dream. That day, I officially began my journey. I didn't say goodbye to my parents, not because I didn't want to, but because I knew they wouldn't care. Paige and Eric likely felt the same. They'd see me as a cautionary tale, a warning against defying the family plan. But one person didn't give up on me, my grandmother. She called me regularly after I left home. Her warm voice over the phone felt like a hug from afar. "My little chef, you're doing the right thing," she said. "Don't let anyone extinguish your fire." Those calls were the only light in those early difficult days. I poured all my savings, borrowed from high school friends, and received a significant contribution from my grandmother to buy an old $8,000 truck. I painted it bright red and roamed Corpus Christi, selling tacos and tamales from the tiny space in the back. Each dish was a piece of my grandmother's memory, and every customer's smile reminded me I was on the right path. But my family didn't see it that way. Just a month after I left, my parents called and officially cut off all contact. They said they wouldn't respond to texts, answer calls, or provide any financial support until I returned to college. Paige and Eric were no different. I became a name erased from family stories, as if I'd never existed. A friend who lived nearby told me my father had told the neighbors I was the rebellious child, choosing to live like a homeless person. Those words hurt more than any wound I'd ever felt. But I didn't let them defeat me. I had my grandmother, my dream, and that bright red truck, a fire that never went out. The months that followed were a series of challenges. I worked 18 hours a day, cooking, driving, finding parking spots, and learning marketing from scratch. Some nights, I slept in the truck, the scent of spices still clinging to my clothes. Some days I sold only a few meals, not enough to cover gas. But every time I wanted to give up, I heard my grandmother's voice in my head. Cook with your heart, Chase. And I kept going. That journey wasn't easy, but it was mine. I had chosen this path, and though disowned by my family, though labeled a failure, I knew I was living true to myself. Standing by that red truck with the smell of chilies and cilantro in the air, I felt alive, truly alive, for the first time in my life. I didn't know that just a year later a great loss would come, turning my world upside down once more. A year had passed, and life on the road with my food truck was an endless string of long days. I woke at dawn, prepped ingredients, cooked, drove to bustling street corners in Corpus Christi and sold plates of tacos, tamales, or steaming bowls of pozole. Some days customers lined up praising my food, making me beam like a kid receiving a compliment. Other days rain poured relentlessly. The world seemed to turn its back, and I sold only a few meals, just enough to buy more chilies and corn. Yet every time I lifted the lid on a pot of mole, inhaling the blend of chocolate and dried chilies, I thought of my grandmother, and every hardship seemed to vanish. She was the only one who believed in me, the sole light in those lonely days. My 19th birthday arrived on a swelteringly unbearable day in Corpus Christi. I didn't expect much. No party, no cake, not even a single birthday wish from my parents, Paige or Eric. They had erased me from their lives as if I were a mistaken ink blot to be wiped away. I'd grown used to their silence, or at least I convinced myself I had. I planned to treat myself to a simple meal on the truck, maybe a plate of homemade tacos and a cold beer, watching the sunset from the back seat. But that late afternoon, as I was chopping cilantro in the truck's tiny kitchen, a mail truck pulled up. A small package arrived, addressed to me in my grandmother Teresa's familiar slanted handwriting. My heart raced. She always had a way of making me feel loved even when the world turned its back. I tore open the package, revealing an old leather-bound notebook tied with a thin piece of twine. A small note slipped out, written in her hand. My little chef, this is a gift from my heart to you. Keep cooking and never forget who you are. Happy 19th birthday. Love, your Grandma Teresa. I opened the notebook and my heart seemed to stop. Each page held a recipe, meticulously handwritten by her, from the mole poblano I learned at 8 years old to the comforting sopa de fideo she made whenever I caught a cold. Some pages had photos glued in, me standing on a wooden stool, face smeared with cornmeal, grinning ear to ear, or her showing me how to roll a tortilla. At the end of each recipe, she wrote short notes like reminders. Add a little love, Chase, or this tastes better when you smile. I sank to the floor of the truck, tears streaming down my cheeks. This wasn't just a notebook. It was her world, her love for me, proof that I wasn't alone. I called her immediately, wanting to thank her, to tell her about the truck and the customers who loved my food. The phone rang and her voice came through warm as summer sunlight. My little chef, she exclaimed when she heard me. Do you like my gift? I laughed, telling her how I'd read every page, how I could almost smell the dried chilies on the paper as if it carried the scent of her kitchen. She laughed heartily, her voice slightly hoarse but full of life, urging me to try her new chiles rellenos recipe. We talked for hours about food, my dreams, and how proud she was hearing about my busy days on the truck. You're doing so well, Chase, she said softly. Don't let anyone extinguish your fire. I didn't know it would be our last conversation. The days that followed saw Corpus Christi enter its tourist season, with visitors flooding the beaches and downtown. The air buzzed with energy, golden sunlight mingling with the sound of waves, music, and people calling to one another. My bright red food truck became a favorite stop for many tourists. From early morning to late evening, lines formed in front of the truck, people patiently waiting for hot tacos and fragrant tamales. The aroma of grilled meat, steamed corn, and Mexican spices wafted through the air, drawing even more customers. I grilled, wrapped, and called out orders, my hands never idle. Sweat dripped down my temples, but I didn't feel tired. Each satisfied smile, each heartfelt compliment fueled me to keep serving. Then on a cool summer day, I had a stellar sales day. I sold out of ingredients earlier than ever before. I was thrilled, imagining how my grandmother would laugh when I told her. I called her, eager to share this small victory, to tell her how customers raved about my tacos al pastor. But the phone rang with no answer. I called again, then a third time. Still nothing. I texted, typing a long message about the day, asking if she was okay. The message showed sent, but no reply came. A sense of unease crept in. My grandmother never missed my calls. I tried to reassure myself. Maybe she was napping or at the market, but the anxiety grew, like a dark cloud over my mind. I couldn't wait any longer. I closed the truck, packed up, and drove straight to Robstown. The 4-hour drive felt endless, but I wasn't tired. I just wanted to see her, hear her voice, and know she was okay. When I arrived, it was dark. Her house loomed under the moonlight, but no lights were on. It stood cold and lifeless, like a shadow without a soul. I knocked, called her name, but only the wind answered. My heart pounded, fear tightening my chest. I ran to the neighbor's house, Rosa's, across a small field. Rosa opened the door, her eyes filled with sorrow and surprise when she saw me. "Chase, visiting so late? Is something wrong?" she asked, placing a hand on my shoulder. "I'm so sorry about your grandmother's passing." I froze, as if the world crumbled beneath me. "What do you mean? Where's my grandmother?" I asked, unable to believe what I'd heard. Rosa's eyes widened. "You didn't know? Your grandmother passed away 3 weeks ago." I stood there as if turned to ice. My grandmother gone? 3 weeks ago? Why didn't anyone tell me what had happened? Rosa began to explain. My grandmother had fallen down the stairs while reaching for a jar of dried chilies on a high shelf. Her head struck the edge of a table. She was rushed to the hospital, but the brain injury was too severe. She passed away hours later. My parents had arranged her funeral. Rosa said she hadn't seen me there and assumed I was too busy to attend. "I didn't realize they kept this from you," she said, her voice choking. It felt like someone had stabbed my heart. My parents, Paige, Eric, not one of them told me about my grandmother's death. They let her go without a word to me. They stole my chance to say goodbye to the person I loved most. Pain and anger surged, like a fire consuming everything inside me. I wanted to scream, to break something, but I just stood there, tears streaming, unable to speak. Rosa hugged me, but her embrace couldn't ease the agony tearing through my chest. That night I stayed at my grandmother's house. The home, once filled with laughter, spices, and her love, was now cold and heartbreakingly silent. I lay on the couch in the living room where I used to watch her roll tortillas. Every corner held memories. The cast-iron skillet she used for mole, the jar of dried chilies on the shelf, the photo of us from the summer I was 10. I couldn't sleep. All night I lay there and cried, remembering the beautiful days with her. Her laugh when I messed up a dish, the way she called me mi pequeño chef. Her warm hugs scented with perfume and cilantro. I clutched the notebook she gave me, reading each line as if it could bring her back. The next morning I visited her grave. Rosa showed me the path to a small hill where my parents had buried her. The grave was simple, a headstone etched with her name, Teresa Maria Gonzalez. I knelt, placing my hand on the cold earth, and sobbed. I apologized for not being there when she needed me, for not knowing she was gone, for not saying one last thank you. I told her about the truck, the successful sales day, how I still cooked her recipes. But my words were just whispers in the wind, unable to reach her anymore. Anger at my family still burned inside me. They hadn't just disowned me, they'd robbed me of the chance to say goodbye to my grandmother. I called my mother, my father, Paige, and Eric. No one answered. The long beeps of unanswered calls drove me to the edge of madness. I returned to the truck, my grandmother's notebook beside me like a companion. I read her recipes, her words, and felt her presence in the dishes, in the scent of chiles and cilantro. But the pain of losing her, of being cast out by my family, left a scar that would never heal. I vowed not to let them defeat me. I would keep cooking, keep living my dream, not to prove anything to them, but to honor my promise to my grandmother. In the days following my grandmother's death, I was like a wounded animal, retreating silently to my red food truck. Corpus Christi no longer felt like home, just a place where I worked, where I tried to turn my dream into reality. Each morning I woke at 4, prepping ingredients, rolling tortillas, roasting dried chiles, and cooking pots of mole from my grandmother's recipes. I tweaked them slightly, adding a pinch of cinnamon or easing up on the chilies to suit American tastes, but always kept her soul in every dish. Each plate of tacos, each bowl of pozole was a reminder that I was doing what she wanted, cooking with my heart. But the journey was far from easy. Starting a food truck was a battle, and I was a 19-year-old with no experience, no money, and no support. I had to learn everything: how to pick high-traffic locations, how to price ingredients to avoid losses, how to smile at customers even when my heart was breaking. Some days I drove for hours to find a good spot to park, only to be chased off by security for lacking a permit. I applied for permits but got rejected for vague reasons or faced cutthroat competition from other food trucks, some willing to play dirty to keep their spots. Once I parked near a night market, hoping for a big day. But by the end I found my tire slashed and another truck owner smirked at me from a distance. I had no proof, no recourse, so I gritted my teeth, replaced the tire, and spent nearly all the week's earnings. The hardships weren't just logistical. During major holidays, the loneliness hit harder than ever. With my grandmother gone, I had no one to share with, no one to turn to when I was exhausted. I saw family photos on social media, Thanksgiving, Christmas, Paige's, or Eric's birthdays, my family smiling, posing, and posting on Paige's account. They gathered, ate, and raised glasses as if I didn't exist. No invitation, no text. It stabbed my heart like 1,000 needles. I started keeping another notebook, not my grandmother's recipe book, but one to record the times my family forgot me. Thanksgiving 2016, no invite. Christmas 2017, no message. Paige's birthday 2018, no call. Each entry was a cut, but I couldn't stop writing. It was my way of facing the pain, turning hurt into fuel. I told myself if they didn't need me, I'd carve my own path. Despite the struggles, there were glimmers of light. One day, an elderly woman stopped at my truck and tried my enchiladas. She ate slowly, then looked at me, eyes glistening. "Young man, this reminds me of my mother's cooking. You made this with your soul, didn't you?" I nodded, choking up. Moments like that made everything worthwhile. Slowly, I built a group of regulars, workers on lunch breaks, families out for evening strolls, students craving cheap, delicious food. They started calling me the taco guy, but this time the name wasn't mockery. It was a sign I was creating something meaningful. I also learned to navigate the challenges. When kicked out of a spot, I found a new one, even if it meant driving farther. When ingredient prices spiked, I negotiated with market vendors, learning to buy in bulk to save. When the truck broke down, I taught myself to fix it, hands covered in grease, even if it took all day. I had no one to rely on, but I had my grandmother's notebook, and every time I opened it, I felt her beside me, whispering, "You can do this, Chase." Those years were a brutal test. At times I thought I'd collapse, that I wasn't strong enough to keep going. But whenever I wanted to give up, I remembered my grandmother. Her smile, the notebook she'd carefully written for me. I recalled her words, "A good dish doesn't just feed the stomach, it feeds the soul." I wanted my food to do that, not just for customers, but for myself. I wanted to nourish my soul, scarred as it was. Gradually, I found my footing. I secured a few regular parking spots and built a steady customer base. I refined my dishes, creating a special sauce, a twist on my grandmother's mole with a hint of orange and chipotle. That drove customers wild. Revenue started to grow, though it was still tight. I no longer ate dry bread every night, but I lived frugally, pouring every cent into maintaining the truck and buying better ingredients. I didn't know that a few years later a big opportunity would come, opening doors to new horizons. But in those harsh days, I only knew I had to keep going. Keep cooking, keep recording the times I was forgotten, and keep the fire my grandmother ignited in me burning. That was how I survived, how I turned pain into strength, and how I began to build a name for myself, Chase Steele, the taco guy who never gave up. 4 years had passed since I left home, and I'd learned that success doesn't come easily, but it's not impossible. By 23, I began to see light at the end of the tunnel. My red food truck, though old and scratched, had become a familiar fixture in Corpus Christi. Customers came not just for the delicious food, but for the story I told through each dish. Mexican-inspired recipes from my grandmother tweaked to suit local tastes. Among them, one thing changed everything: my special sauce. I called it salsa de Teresa, a variation of my grandmother's mole, infused with fresh orange zest, smoked chipotle, and a hint of cinnamon for a perfect balance of spicy, sweet, and rich. I spent months experimenting in the truck's cramped kitchen, tossing out countless batches for being too spicy, too sweet, or lacking the soul I wanted. But when I perfected it, customers went wild. They lined up longer, ordered extra plates just for more sauce, and some asked if I'd sell it in jars. "Taco guy, is this magic?" A regular laughed, holding a plate of sauce-drenched tacos. I just smiled, but inside I knew it wasn't magic. It was my grandmother's love poured into every drop. Thanks to Salsa de Teresa, business took off. Revenue grew steadily, and I saved enough to buy another truck, then another. Within months, I expanded to 5 red food trucks operating across Corpus Christi and nearby towns. I hired a few employees, young, passionate people who loved cooking as much as I did, and taught them my grandmother's recipes, though I kept Salsa de Teresa my secret. I no longer slept in the truck or ate dry bread every night. I rented a small apartment, enough for a proper bed, though I still spent most of my time on the truck, cooking and connecting with customers. Each day I opened my grandmother's notebook, read her recipes, and felt her smiling somewhere, proud of me. Local media began to take notice. One day, a reporter from the Corpus Christi Caller-Times stopped by, tried my enchiladas, and asked if she could write about the taco guy taking the city by storm. I blushed, unaccustomed to attention, but agreed. The article came out with the headline, "From Truck to Heart, Chase Steele's Culinary Journey." It detailed my story, how I ditched college to chase my passion, the Mexican dishes I learned from my grandmother. The article spread faster than I expected. Crowds grew, and local TV stations invited me onto morning shows. I stood before cameras, hands shaking as I held a skillet, but I shared my story about my grandmother, my dream, and how I wanted to bring joy through every dish. "Cooking isn't just a job," I said in one interview. "It's how I keep my grandmother alive." But even as the spotlight began to shine, I felt lonely. I still kept my forgotten notebook, recording the times my family overlooked me. That Thanksgiving, I saw photos of my parents, Paige and Eric, online, beaming at a family gathering. "No invite," I wrote, gripping the pen tightly. For Eric's birthday, I sent a text wishing him well. No reply. "No response," I added. Each entry was a cut, but I didn't let them drag me down. I turned the pain into drive, pouring my heart into my work. At 24, an opportunity bigger than anything I'd imagined arrived: MasterChef US. I saw the casting call online for the prestigious culinary competition where talented chefs from across America vied to become a star. I scoffed, thinking I had no chance. I was just a taco truck guy with no degree, no formal culinary training. But a part of me, the part that still heard my grandmother's whispers, urged me to try. "If you don't try, how will you know how far you can go?" I told myself. I submitted an application with a short phone-shot video of me cooking my grandmother's chiles rellenos, sharing my journey. I didn't expect much, just thought at least I dared to try. A month later, I got an email from the organizers. I was selected for the preliminary round in Houston. I was stunned, rereading the email in disbelief. On the audition day, I stood among dozens of contestants, culinary school graduates, fancy restaurant chefs, people brimming with polished techniques. In my worn shirt, clutching a box of tacos al pastor with salsa de Teresa, I felt like an outsider. When my turn came, I stepped up, placed my dish before 3 renowned judges, and shared my story. My grandmother, the truck, how each dish was a piece of memory. I saw their eyebrows raise, unsure if it was surprise or skepticism. Then they tasted the food. Silence. The head judge, a chef known for his piercing gaze, chewed slowly, then looked at me. "Where did you learn to cook this?" he asked. I replied, voice trembling, "From my grandmother in her small kitchen in Robstown." He nodded, and then a miracle happened. They praised me. "This sauce is a masterpiece," another judge said. "You have a story, and this dish tells it perfectly." I passed the preliminary round, then the next and the next. Each round I brought one of my grandmother's dishes, reimagined in my own way, and each time I won the judges over. Not just with flavor, but with the heart I poured into it. The MasterChef journey wasn't easy. I faced grueling challenges, cooking French dishes I'd never tried, making desserts I didn't know how to start, or creating fine dining plates under tight time limits. At times I wanted to quit, feeling I didn't belong, but each time I opened my grandmother's notebook, read her words, "Cook with your heart," and pressed on. I shared my story in every episode, and viewers began to love me. Not because I was the best chef, but because I was myself. A taco guy with a big dream. The finale was an emotional whirlwind. I faced a young New York chef with flawless technique and sky-high confidence. The challenge was to create a 3-course menu that represented me. I made a sopa de fideo starter, chiles rellenos with salsa de Teresa as the main, and a caramel flan with a hint of orange for dessert, all inspired by my grandmother. As the judges tasted, I stood there, heart pounding, hands trembling so much I shoved them in my pockets. They were silent. Then the head judge stood, looked at me, and said, "Chase, you've brought your soul to this table. This is true cuisine." When they announced me as the winner, I collapsed to my knees, tears streaming. I'd done it. I'd kept my promise to my grandmother. After MasterChef, the media dubbed me the culinary star from a food truck. Articles, interviews, and collaboration offers came pouring in. I was overwhelmed with joy. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just recognized. I was loved, celebrated, sought after. Those who once mocked me, who called me the taco guy with a sneer, now looked at me with admiration. Winning MasterChef didn't just bring fame. It opened doors I never dared to dream of. Investors started approaching me. People in sleek suits talking excitedly about opportunities and personal branding in ways I wasn't used to. One of them, James Carver, a titan in Miami's culinary scene, invited me to a fancy restaurant to talk business. I walked in, still wearing my worn-out shirt and scuffed shoes, feeling out of place among wine glasses and pristine white tablecloths. Carver looked at me, smiled, and said, "Chase, you have a story, a talent, and something no one else has. Salsa de Teresa. I want to help you turn it into an empire." Stunned, I nodded, and that nod changed everything. At 25, I opened my first restaurant, Chase's Cocina. Located in the heart of Miami, it was a spacious venue with walls painted the same fiery red as my first food truck. The menu blended my grandmother's traditional Mexican dishes with my own creations, with salsa de Teresa as the shining star. Customers flocked in, from casual food lovers to picky critics. They came not just for the food, but for my story. A taco truck guy disowned by his family, now standing at the top. Articles called Chase's Cocina, a fresh breath of Mexican cuisine in America, and I was once again hailed as the star from a food truck. Success came faster than I expected. Within 2 years, I opened 3 more restaurants, one in Miami, one in Austin, and one in Los Angeles. Each was a milestone, a reminder that I'd achieved what my parents once called foolish. I partnered with major investors who helped me scale up, from building supply chains to hiring talented chefs. I kept Salsa de Teresa a secret, personally making the first batches for each restaurant, a way to keep my grandmother present. Customers loved it, and food critics wrote lengthy reviews dissecting the layers of flavor in my sauce. One even called it a symphony of emotions. And I smiled, thinking my grandmother must be laughing heartily somewhere in heaven. My wealth grew rapidly beyond anything I'd imagined. By 29, I was worth over $100 million, a figure that stunned me every time I thought about it. I moved from my tiny Corpus Christi apartment to a Miami penthouse with windows overlooking the shimmering ocean. I bought a new car, not to show off, but because I was tired of fixing the old truck. I appeared on national TV shows, from Good Morning America to the Food Network, cooking for millions and sharing my story about my grandmother and my journey. I received thousands of messages from young people saying I'd inspired them to chase their dreams despite unsupportive families. Each message was a balm for my heart, but not enough to erase the old pain. Despite being adored by millions, I hadn't once reconnected with my parents, Paige or Eric. I knew they'd seen me in the news, on TV, or at least heard about my success through colleagues or neighbors. People in Corpus Christi were talking about me as a source of pride. I quietly kept tabs on my family. Paige was now a promising young lawyer, and Eric was studying to become a doctor, just as my parents planned. I saw them on social media, in perfect family photos, still without me. I kept my forgotten notebook, though I wrote in it less often. But every holiday, Christmas, Thanksgiving, or their birthdays, I opened it, looked at the old entries, and felt an emptiness I couldn't fill. Some nights, standing alone in my penthouse, gazing at the ocean, I wondered if I was truly happy. I had everything: money, fame, recognition, but I still felt lonely. The scars from my past wouldn't fade. I carried the pain of being disowned, forgotten, deemed a failure. I didn't reach out to my family, not because I didn't want to, but because I was afraid. Afraid they'd still see me as an outsider, afraid they'd never understand the fire my grandmother ignited in me. I told myself I didn't need them, that I'd built a life without them. But deep down, I knew I still longed for the day they'd look at me and say, "Chase, we were wrong." And then something unexpected happened. Late that year, as I was at my main restaurant in Miami reviewing the holiday season menu, my phone buzzed. An unfamiliar number, but the area code was from Corpus Christi. I hesitated, thinking it might be an old customer or a supplier. But when I answered, the voice on the other end stopped me cold. "Chase," my mother, Carol Steele, said softly, her tone hesitant. "Are you doing okay?" I nearly dropped the phone. It had been over a decade since I last heard her voice. I responded, my voice dry. "I'm fine. Why are you calling?" She paused, then said, "We'd like to invite you to Christmas dinner. It's been a long time. The family wants to see you." I went silent, unsure how to respond. This invitation, after more than 10 years of being sidelined, came like a stone thrown into the calm lake of my life. "I'll think about it," I said, then hung up, my heart pounding. The invitation threw me into turmoil. Part of me wanted to refuse, to keep living my life without looking back. But another part, the part that still carried the boy who yearned for his family's love, wanted to go. I opened my forgotten notebook, staring at the faded entries. Each line was a cut, and I wondered if I had the courage to walk back into the house that had once pushed me out. Then I thought of my grandmother, her words echoing, "Forgive, Chase, but don't forget." I decided to go, not to reconcile, but to confront, both them and myself. On Christmas Day, I drove to Corpus Christi, not in my old red food truck, but in a sleek black SUV. I wore a simple suit, but carried my grandmother's recipe notebook and the forgotten notebook in my pocket. As I pulled up to the old house where I grew up, a strange feeling washed over me. The house looked the same, with its white picket fence and a twinkling Christmas tree in the yard. But it was no longer my home. I took a deep breath, knocked, and braced myself for what was to come. My mother opened the door, her smile strained but warm. "Chase, you came," she said, pulling me into a hug I didn't return. My father, Anthony Steele, stood in the living room, as tall and commanding as ever, but his eyes held a softer edge. Paige and Eric were there, both grown, dressed in expensive clothes. Paige, now a successful lawyer, had her hair tied high and a confident smile. Eric, in his final year of medical school, looked strikingly like our father. They smiled at me, and for the first time in over a decade, I felt welcomed. Or at least, they were trying to make it seem that way. The Christmas dinner took place in the large dining room, with a table draped in white linen and flickering candles. The smell of roasted turkey and mashed potatoes filled the air. But I couldn't help thinking of my grandmother's Christmas meals, with tamales and pozole brimming with love. Everyone chatted cheerfully, asking about MasterChef, my restaurant chain, my life in Miami. "You've made us so proud, Chase," my father said, his voice deep and weighty. Paige nodded, adding, "I watched your finale on TV. It was unbelievable." Eric, quieter, just smiled and nodded. I gave short replies, keeping a calm exterior, but inside a storm was brewing. They admired me, or at least acted like it. But I couldn't forget the years they turned their backs, the times they called my dream foolish, the times they left me to face my pain alone. I looked at them, smiling and talking, but in my mind I heard my grandmother's voice. "Don't forget, Chase." I knew they wanted something, and I didn't have to wait long to find out. Midway through dinner, as everyone raised their wine glasses, my mother cleared her throat, glanced at my father, then turned to me. "Chase," she said, her voice sweet but cautious, "we're so proud of what you've accomplished. You've built an incredible career." I nodded, waiting. "Eric's planning to open a clinic in Houston after he graduates," she continued. "It's a big project, but it needs some funding. And Paige wants to start her own law firm. We thought, with your success, maybe you could help your siblings a little." The room grew heavy. I set my glass down, looking at my mother, then my father, Paige, and Eric. They all watched me, their eyes a mix of hope and awkwardness. My face flushed, not with anger, but with a familiar pain. They hadn't invited me back to reconcile. They invited me because I was now Chase Steele, the culinary millionaire who could help them. I smiled, but it was ice cold. "I'll think about it," I said evenly. But inside, I already had my answer. After dinner, as everyone moved to the living room to open gifts, I quietly stood, pulling a notebook from my pocket. Not my grandmother's recipe book, but the forgotten one where I'd recorded every time my family pushed me aside. I took a deep breath, stepped to the center of the room, and said, "Before we open presents, I want to share something." They looked at me, curious. I opened the notebook, my voice calm but firm. "Thank you for inviting me today. This is the first time in 12 years I've sat here with family. But I think you all need to hear a few things." I began reading, each entry a painful memory. The day Grandma died, no one told me. I found out from Rosa 3 weeks after the funeral. My mother flinched, hand covering her mouth, but I didn't stop. Your 25th anniversary, no invite. Christmas, 11 years in a row, no invite. Thanksgiving, 12 years in a row, no invite. Paige's birthdays, Eric's, Dad's, Mom's, not a single invitation, not a single text. I read slowly, each line like a blade, cutting not just them but me. The room grew stifling, as if the world held its breath. My father bowed his head, gripping his glass tightly. My mother looked at me, eyes red. Paige and Eric sat frozen, their gazes wavering between shock and shame. "I wrote it all down," I said, my voice hoarse with emotion. "Not for revenge, but to remind myself I survived, even without any of you. I built everything from nothing, with Grandma's notebook and a dream you called foolish. And now, when I'm successful, you invite me back, not to apologize, but to ask for money." Silence. No one spoke. I closed the notebook, looking at them one last time. "I can't help," I said, my voice soft but resolute. "Not because I don't have the means, but because I can't forget what happened. I wish you all a Merry Christmas." I turned, walked out of the house, and left them in heavy silence. Outside, the air was freezing and small snowflakes began to fall. I climbed into my SUV, my gaze lingering on the house, its twinkling lights now empty to me. I didn't cry, but my heart ached. I knew I'd done the right thing, but it didn't lessen the pain. I drove away carrying my grandmother's recipe notebook and the forgotten one, knowing my journey was far from over. The streets of Corpus Christi shimmered in the glow of streetlights and a thin layer of snow. I drove through familiar roads, ones I'd biked as a kid, dreaming of dishes in my grandmother's kitchen. But now, this city was no longer home. My home was the kitchens of Chase's Cocina, the scent of chipotle and fresh cilantro, the fire my grandmother had kindled in me. I had no clear plan when I left the Christmas dinner, but my feet led me to the place I knew I had to go, the cemetery where my grandmother Teresa rested. I parked by the road leading up the small hill. Snow fell thicker, blanketing the cold ground. I walked, my expensive shoes sinking into the soft earth, clutching my grandmother's recipe notebook. Her grave appeared before me, simple but serene, with a headstone etched, Teresa Maria Gonzalez. I knelt, placing my hand on the cold earth, feeling as if she were still there, somewhere in the air, in the memories I'd carried for 12 years. "Grandma," I whispered, my voice hoarse. "I did it. I brought your food to the world like you said I could. But I'm so tired." Tears rolled down my cheeks, hot against the winter chill. I told her everything, about winning MasterChef, the restaurant chain, the lonely nights in my penthouse overlooking the sea. And I told her about the Christmas dinner, how I confronted my family, about the forgotten notebook and the entries carved into my soul. "I don't know if I can forgive them," I said, my voice breaking, "but I know you'd want me to keep going. You always said, forgive, but don't forget. I'm trying, Grandma." I opened her recipe notebook to the last page where she'd written a short note. "Chase, you are my light. Let that light shine no matter how dark the world gets." I smiled through tears, feeling her right there, hugging me like those summer days in Robstown when I was a boy with cornmeal-covered hands. "I'll keep going, Grandma," I promised. "I won't let the fire you lit die out." Sitting by her grave, I thought about my journey, from a boy labeled a failure to a man who built an empire from a love of food. I thought about the lessons my grandmother and life had taught me. I realized that passion is a fire no one can extinguish if you believe in it. I'd chosen my path despite being disowned, despite the world's doubts. I'd stood up time and again because I believed in the dream my grandmother planted in me. And I realized that forgiveness is a journey, not a destination. I wasn't ready to fully forgive my parents, Paige or Eric. The scars they left remained, in the forgotten notebook and in my heart. But I was learning to let go, not for them, but for myself. I didn't want to live with bitterness forever. My grandmother once said, "A good dish needs balance. So does life, Chase." I was trying to find that balance between pain and hope, between past and future. I stood, wiped my tears, and placed a small flower by her grave, a white daisy, her favorite. "Thank you, Grandma," I said, my voice steadier. "I'll keep making you proud." I walked back to my car, feeling lighter, as if a weight had lifted. The snow still fell, but it no longer felt so cold. I saw a camera flash in the distance, probably a reporter spotting me, as they often did. But this time I didn't care. I wasn't running from the spotlight or my past. I was Chase Steele, and I had found my light. As I drove away from the cemetery, I thought about the advice I'd share with anyone fighting for their dream, as I once did. Believe in yourself even when no one else does. Your dream is worth it no matter what the world says. Find a fire, a person, a memory, a reason to keep you going when things get tough. For me, it was my grandmother and her notebook. Life is never easy, but when you pour your soul into what you do, you'll find meaning, even in the darkest days. I drove back to Miami, the city lights emerging ahead like a promise of what awaited. My journey wasn't over, and I knew that even on cold, snowy days, my grandmother's light would always guide me. Guide me. Guide me. guide me, 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 guide